Hello everyone and welcome back to another edition of the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. My name is Christopher Shepard. Thank you all for tuning in to today's show. Happy Thursday to you all. We have a good one ahead. We start off with looking ahead to Sunday's slate in terms of prop bets. Yesterday we looked specifically at Thursday Night Football. Today we are getting into all the Sunday games, thus all those games in terms of prop bets will be spoken about in our first segment. Then we get into some injury updates and the ensuing fantasy implications, at least for this particular weekend for you. Then I get into one of my favorite segments that I do every week, my own personal picks for the biggest games of the week based off the spread. Fact versus Fiction makes its triumphant return to its show, a segment that is perhaps our newest segment here on the show. I really love doing it, should be a good one. And to close out, we look ahead to Sunday Night Football betting preview. But before we get into any of that, I do want to remind you that if you do feel so inclined, you want to view more content such as this or more short content, interact with more of where we post, I would consider liking, subscribing, and following to the show. I feel like that is the best way to interact with all different podcasts. We have a lot going on. Basketball season just started. Nelson's got you covered over there at the Basketball Podcast. Everyone doing their own things in their respective rights. Also, if you want to interact with my show more directly or other shows around the network as well, consider making yourselves available to the Super Chat, Super Things, or Super Stickers features here on YouTube to interact with us during our live streams. You can either click the $ in the comment section to leave a tip or donation, or also just leave any burning questions, comments, or concerns you may have throughout the show about any particular segment or just your own thoughts. Maybe you're looking for some trade advice, looking for some fantasy advice, stardom, cinema advice, what have you. I am here for it, and it's greatly appreciated in advance because it makes this show that much better. But without further ado, let's get into our first segment of the day, looking at some popular prop bets. Well, not necessarily popular, but good ones for Sunday's slate of games in the NFL. And all these games are very good, very intriguing games in terms of a betting perspective. You have your classic divisional matchups, you have good interconference games, you have games between evenly matched opponents. Thus, you're going to be overwhelmed, probably, because of the fact that there are so many good games going on around the NFL this weekend. But I've limited to 4 different prop bets that I myself found appealing and I wanted to present to you, but these are just mine. Let me know if you have your own or have any questions about your own prop bets in particular throughout this segment, and we can have a nice discourse surrounding these Week 8 prop bets. Without further ado, let's jump right into the first one. Let's talk about a quarterback who has had his peaks and valleys this season. I cannot deny that. But in this matchup, certainly feels like he's going to be a little bit overwhelmed by the occasion, I believe. Now, this is a matchup in which he's favored. It's a home game for him, and it's in his division. But going off of what I saw last week, which was not pretty, and how the Bucs defense can exploit that, I'm looking for Kirk Cousins to have another pedestrian game. Maybe even one where he's very similar in how he performed against Seattle last week. Under 259.5 yards is my bet for him in this game at minus 137. So it's just based off of something that I see in how he stagnates this offense when you have players of the potential the Falcons have and you don't necessarily utilize them in certain moments as well as I would hope. Let's say I were a Falcons fan and I was just satisfied by the utilization of Bijan and Algier in certain moments, or because of the fact that Kirk Cousins can only make X number of throws to X areas of the field. Thus, that's why I feel like it's such a frustrating thing to watch if you're watching the Falcons offense, because you can see the glimpses of what this Atlanta Falcons offense can be and potentially how far it could go in the playoffs should they get there. But it's all contingent on the play of Kirk Cousins, and he hasn't really answered the call enough for me to think he can be, on a consistent basis, someone who the Falcons will rely upon should they get to the playoffs and should they have ambitions of making a little run in them. So that's why I'm taking the under, even though it certainly feels as if the Atlanta Falcons are playing with house money in this game. I just feel like it's a weird divisional game, a rematch of perhaps one of the weirder games of the NFL season. Thus, a lot of things can happen, so I'm not staking my claim and saying that this Atlanta Falcons offense will look one way or the other. I just feel like, going off of last week at home, I don't feel like Kirk Cousins is the answer in games such as this and in the future down the road when they're trying to either get into the playoffs or make a playoff run. But on a more positive note, let's talk about another game between two surprising contenders in both the Bears and the Commanders, and a player who, after a really rocky start to the year, has proven his worth for this team and how important he's going to be in order for the Bears to be truly taken seriously, and that is DeAndre Swift. I love what he's done over the past 3 weeks to fully get himself into the good graces of this Chicago Bears offense, and with fantasy football managers for that matter as well. Truly a revelation for my team, helping me win and pull out some very crucial games over the past couple of weeks. But in the betting side of things, he's a very attractive player right now to bet on because he's coming off the bye. The Bears are playing perhaps the hardest game left on their schedule. If you look at the Bears' schedule, and I'm just going to pull it up really quickly here, there aren't that many games that stand out to you, perhaps outside of their division, that feel like they're going to be in for a rough ride. After the Commanders, they have the Cardinals and the Patriots before they get into more of their divisional slate with the Packers, Vikings, and Bears. So as you can see, peppered between their divisional contests are games the Bears should be favored in. They do have a tough conference schedule. They still have the 49ers and Seahawks to play, what could be very pivotal games in terms of their playoff hopes this season. But looking at the Bears' schedule, I certainly feel that there are opportunities for this team to make noise. And it's going to hinge on a player of DeAndre Swift's caliber, a guy who they brought in from Philly after a career year to really help them. So with that being said, looking at his props for this week, I'm taking the over in terms of his yardage. It's over 59.5 yards, also at minus 137 out there in the market. And I think that he is really primed for a nice stretch of games. I think that this kind of bye came at a very opportune time for the Bears, coming back from London after the emotional win abroad against Jacksonville that proved that, yes, even though it's Jacksonville, they have the firepower on the offensive side of the football to really stymie teams, and their defense can complement them as well. But it's DeAndre Swift, the straw that's going to stir the drink. That's just my opinion about this Bears offense. Let's go to a new addition for a team that's looking like it could be rejuvenated with this new addition. A guy who I certainly was apprehensive about in terms of being a trade candidate and going to this particular team, but he proved me wrong in his first game with them, and it is Amari Cooper of the Buffalo Bills going on the road to Seattle. Now, here's the interesting thing about this bet. Josh Allen on the road has been appallingly bad this season. His passing yardage per game has dropped significantly. He's thrown less passing touchdowns. And thus, that is why I feel like it's so crucial to have someone like Amari Cooper in hostile environments, especially an environment like the Seattle Seahawks can bring in a home atmosphere. So, Amari Cooper, I'm not saying he's always going to have pretty stats or lofty standards to set in Buffalo. He's there mainly to make this offense more varied. And not for nothing, I still think Seattle will be in this game, but Amari Cooper is now an asset to the Bills' offense that really allows them to diversify what they can do. It's a bit of a risky one because it contributes to this narrative of Josh Allen opening up his vertical passing game yet again, thus leading him to be more, how should I say it, ambitious in terms of what he can do downfield. But the reason why Amari Cooper is so special is because he's not just a downfield threat. He opens up space for other receivers, and that's what makes him so dangerous. Thus, I am taking the over on him a little bit begrudgingly because I do think this could be a game where other offensive weapons for the Bills make some noise. Guys like Kincaid, guys like Cook perhaps, guys like Coleman. But I do think that Amari Cooper will just hit the over. 55.5 yards is his over-under total for this week at minus 137. And the final one that I want to touch upon, this is a bit of a weird one because I feel like this matchup for this particular quarterback is a matchup where you feel like he should be comfortable hitting the over here, but it's just one of those games where I can't look past the different vibe that this Jacksonville Jaguars team has rolling in. Yes, they have the tougher, how should I put it, acclimation period for this game as they were just coming back from a 2-game trip in London. But I feel like a large part of why they've kind of been underestimated is not just the ineptitudes of their offense, but because of the fact that no one really knows how good this defense can be. Yes, they played some very, mundane opponents, not necessarily the best offenses, and the Packers' offense is one that's really going to challenge them. But in this particular case, the reason why I'm saying Jordan Love is going to hit the under in terms of his passing touchdowns this week is because I feel like how I see the Jags defense is kind of how I see a team, say, in either college football or high school, who is heavily contingent on identity. And their identity going forward, yes, may lean to trying to figure out their offense, but you can't get too much of a good thing. And the Jags defense is perhaps the best thing about them at this current point. And so, going up against this very difficult to defend Packers unit, I think that there are ways in which the Jaguars can win certain matchups. If you take away, for example, the run game, Jordan Love may be forced to pass more than he wants to, and thus you can create a couple of turnovers. Conversely, you can look at it from a perspective of shutting down the pass game, even though there's a lot of weapons to shut down and account for. You can limit what Josh Jacobs does. And so you pick and choose your moments if you're the Jacksonville defense because you know that your offense might struggle in this game. But if you find a certain way to break down this Packers offense through focusing on one component of it and honing in on stopping that, then you might have a good chance of limiting the danger of what Jordan Love can do in the passing game. So I'm going to take a little bit reluctantly, but in a situation where I feel like he could be unsettled, Jordan Love hit his under at minus 137 in terms of 2 passing touchdowns. But those are my 4 particular prop bets I wanted to bring to your attention. Let me know what you think about them in the comments, or let me know if you have any of your own prop bets that you might want me to analyze. I love hearing your opinions. But when we come back after this short break, we're looking around the NFL in terms of injuries. I'm going to be updating you guys on some of the big ones and also how you have to view them in terms of fantasy implications as well. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.